Jay here for Stretford Paddock. This is the Paper Talk. As you can see, we're in the studio. We are live, so get involved in the chat and the comments and let us know what you think about all the latest Manchester United news. And it is bad news this morning. We have just had a bit of breaking news, an update from Laurie Whitwell on Patrick Dorgu, otherwise known as Ballon Dorgu, of course. And it looks like he's going to be out for 10 weeks after scans revealed his hamstring injury. You can see the tweet there on your screens. Make sure you get involved in the chat and the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. We saw him go off against Arsenal at first, as it says there. It looked like it could be just cramp. That was what we were hoping for, and that was what Michael Carrick alluded to. However, it is more serious. He is going to be out for 10 weeks, and he's going to miss 8 games. 8 games for Dorgu to miss, which, when you think about it, considering we've only got, let me just remind myself, 15 games left. So he's going to miss more than half the remaining games just when he was flying, just when he was banging in absolute worldies. 2 goals in his last 2 games against big opposition as well in Manchester City and Arsenal. Absolutely running the show. That is pretty devastating for Manchester United. I know we've got other options. I know we've got Matheus Cunha. I know it's not like this is the end of our season, even though I just put that in the chat. But it is a blow. It is a big blow because when a player's playing the way Dorgu is and scoring goals like he scored at the Emirates, you want him to carry on that run. You want him to keep going. You want him to be part of sort of Manchester United pushing for the top 4. I mean, I don't mean to be melodramatic, but I do feel like this is the end of our title race this season. I do. I think that's it. I don't think we're going to win 21 this season now. I thought we had a chance before this, but I'm not so sure. Get involved in the chat and the comments. Let me just mute someone there who's chatting absolute garbage and trying to spam the chat. There you go. You can, you know what? Let's just hide him. Let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat. Give us your comments on it. Patrick Dorgu out for 8 games. He could be back, I think, according to the article in The Athletic, for the Leeds United game on April the 11th. I mean, it is pretty grim, innit? You never know. It could be sooner, but it might just be that. Get involved in the chat and the comments. Glenn F is here. I think I've seen Santa Notch, Mick Hullahan, Cjo, James John. He says, I blame Laurie. Oh man, 10 weeks, says Sam Emery. Martin P says, great, we are potentially on a good run and lack of depth in attacking hits again. Just as he's really hit form as well, says Real recognises Real. Yeah, it's a shame because he's doing really well. And Dorgu's one of those who's had his critics and he's been a bit up and down since he's been at United, to be fair to the lad. I'm not just going to pretend he's just been absolutely amazing since he arrived. He hasn't. He's took his time to sort of settle in, which can be expected of a player going from Lecce in Syria to Manchester United and to a struggling Manchester United. When he came in January of 2025, United were in one of the worst runs we've ever had in our history. We were right in the sort of bottom half of the table in a almost relegation battle, which you never say about Manchester United. Certainly not in my lifetime. He comes in, he's playing on the right, he's playing on the left, he's this wing back. You're like, okay, the team's struggling. In pre-season, I thought he did very well. When we did a sort of roundup of pre-season, I think 3 out of the 4 of us, in me, Maka, Joe and Howson, picked Dorgu as our player of the tournament, if you can call that sort of Summer Tour of America a tournament. So it was, he was a player that showed what he could do. The season starts and he's a little bit up and down, has a couple of good games, has games where he's sort of a few question marks. Some fans were questioning him, turning on him a little bit. Others were saying, look, you can see there's a player there. However, the last few games in particular, last 2 games in particular, he's absolutely smashed it. Scoring goals, running at defenders, looking the part, and that goal at the Emirates is genuinely one of the best goals I've seen. It was amazing. So, gutted for him. Gutted for Michael Carrick as well. Because if Michael Carrick is going to have a job or going to have a chance of getting a job permanently, then he needs his best players available. And right now, Patrick Dorgu is one of his best players. Now, look, it is devastating. It is a blow. And you can't ignore the fact that a player who's playing so well is now out for over half of the remainder of the season. However, it's not the end of the world. United do have options. Matheus Cunha, who's been playing very well, let's not forget, when he's come off the bench. I think he's got a goal and an assist since he came off the bench, if I'm getting that right, in the last 2 games. You'd expect him to come in now. You'd expect him to start matches, and you'd expect him to become one of the main men in Dorgu's absence, which kind of feels a bit weird, doesn't it, saying that? You wouldn't have thought that a few months ago, that it'd be Cunha on the bench and Dorgu starting in an attacking role. I think we've got some on just Dorgu's role in the team. I think this is from Dean Jones Soccer. It says, Man United now see Dorgu as a winger going forward, with the coaching staff convinced it's his best position. Because of this, the club could move to sign a new left-back to cover for Luke Shaw in the next transfer window. That all makes sense. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Harry Hamas as well. Are the club going to look at him as an option at left-back? I don't know. I like Hamas. We'll see if he's a feasible option. He's gone out on another loan, hasn't he, Harry Hamas? He did very well at Sheffield Wednesday. Even though they were struggling, he did very well. He's gone to Norwich. I think did he play in that game? Didn't they just beat Coventry, Norwich? I'm pretty sure they did. So we'll see what happens with the future with so he came off the bench, for Norwich, I think, in their last game. Yeah, Dorgu doing very well. He's out. We have other options. We'll have to wait and see what happens in the summer, but I'm not surprised the club are looking at him as a winger, because he's been doing very, very well in that advanced position. And you've got to give Dorgu credit as well, because I think he's been getting extra coaching. He's really knuckled down. He's really tried his best to make the most of his Manchester United career, getting extra coaching. I'm a big fan of that when players do that, when you say, look, let's try and do everything I can to get myself playing at the very, very top level. We spoke to him a couple of times on tour. Joe spoke to him in the mix zone. I spoke to him at an event, and he came across well. He came across like a pretty chilled lad who spoke a lot of sense and was very sort of praise the United fans, I should say. Sorry, get my words out. Quite a lot. Very positive about the Manchester United fans and the support he'd got. So he said the right things. He's been playing well, doing the right things, and I'm a bit gutted for him. Let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat and the comments. Jacoya Trot says, hopefully the rest of the squad can avoid an injury crisis. John Tate says, I need Mateus Cunha to get goals now. I need to cook. Galvatron says, we need to sign a midfielder, even on loan, because if we get a midfielder injured, then we're in trouble. Loads of people saying, it's just gutting news. Glenn F says, everyone is crying about Ballon Dorgu. I'm gutted, but we do have Cunha to replace him. Yeah, I've mentioned that a few times. It seems like the obvious change now for Michael Carrick will be Mateus Cunha comes in and replaces him. Just a shame as well, because whilst I like Cunha and I've not got no qualms about him starting, having him on the bench was a massive plus as well, because you look at that bench when you've got the likes of Cunha and Sesko on there, you go, crikey, that is a bench. What I'd imagine now would happen, is someone like Shea Lacey maybe takes that spot on the bench and he becomes the sort of the next in line, shall we say, to come off the bench. So he's still a good option, but let's not sugarcoat it. It is bad news for Manchester United. Hopefully he's back within those 10 weeks, but what is being reported by Laurie Whitwell, very reliable journalist, is that the scan there shown that there's a hamstring injury and he's going to be 10 weeks until we see Ballon Dorgu back in a Manchester United shirt. Also, the Sword Dust says Mason Mount too. Good point about Mason Mount. It is a bit of a weird one. I think Ronnie made this point on the Paddock podcast, and I agree with it. Mason Mount, and he might have just actually made this point to me upstairs when we were chatting. I think Mason Mount's probably the one who suffered the most from Amorim going, in terms of his role in this team. Because he's not really a winger, is it, Mason Mount, as such? And I know you could argue that our wingers do tuck in a little bit, and Bumo tucks in when he's not. I mean, to be honest with you, Bumo's been leading the line a lot of the time. But when he has played on the wing, he doesn't like to tuck in. Cunha can tuck in a little bit. Mount, however, feels a little bit more like a 10. He sort of fitted that role of those two 10s very well for Ruben Amorim. You could argue he's one of Ruben Amorim's best players. Now it's slightly different, and he isn't even starting, and it does feel a little bit like he's suffering with what Kobbie Mainoo was suffering with under Amorim, in the sense that it feels like his pathway to the first team is probably blocked by Bruno. I feel like for Mount to start, maybe Bruno comes out. However, we'll have to wait and see, because we don't know. Maybe Michael Carrick says, look, I can see a way that we start Mason Mount and Cunha stays on the bench. I don't think it's quite the same fit for me, but it could happen. Let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat in the comments. But how would you see it changing? What would you do to change it at Manchester United with the devastating news that Ballon Dorgu is out for 10 weeks? Steve M says, I'd expect Cunha to come in ahead of Dorgu for games against low blocks anyway, which is what we'll face in a lot of the coming weeks. So there you go then. Gutted for Dorgu, speedy recovery, says Kev. The Glank says, we bought him as a number 8 so he can play in Mainoo's position. I presume you're talking about Mason Mount. Right, let's talk about some of the rumours doing the rounds. So this is in the Mirror, I've seen, right, a lot of noise over the last sort of few days about Cole Palmer. Sky are running it today about Palmer wants to come to United. He's open to a move to Manchester United. He's homesick from Manchester and will be willing to come to United. He's a United fan, we know that. He doesn't want to go back to Manchester City. Don't know if City be in for him. I'd imagine they would if they could get him because he's such a good player. However, I do take some of these stories with a pinch of salt because I think a lot of them are emanating from the Sun. Hashtag don't buy the Sun. So I'm not going to be like hanging my hat on the idea that Cole Palmer is coming back to Manchester United because of that. However, we have seen a lot of newspapers over the last few days saying, look, there might be something in this with Cole Palmer back to Manchester United. And we can dream, can't we? Because I think most United fans would have Cole Palmer at United. I think I said back to Manchester United. I meant back to Manchester. It says here in the Mirror, how Man United could line up with sensational Cole Palmer and Carlos Baleba transfers. Now, I'm always a little bit wary of these stories, like how we could line up. This could be the United team with signings. I've seen them far too often where we've done them where Wesley Sneijder features in them, or, you know, players that we will link with Erling Haaland, Declan Rice, and we know what happens with them. Or, you know, here's how United could line up if we get Jude Bellingham, and it doesn't happen, and you're like, But there is a little bit of fire to this smoke. Cole Palmer, I'm going to file it under doubtful. Unlikely and doubtful. That sort of ballpark. It's not impossible, but I'm not that sure it is going to happen. I think the one thing you could say is he might be homesick. He might want to come back to Manchester. I mean, that's always feasible. And if he does want to come back to Manchester and he doesn't want to go back to Manchester City, then obviously United would be the only destination, really. Would Chelsea sell him? He's on a contract there till about 2075 or something stupid. I think he signed a 9-year deal, was it? You can never count Chelsea out with what they do because they do some madness with transfers. Now, I know he's one of their best players and they're probably reluctant to sell him, but I just don't know. I feel like with Chelsea, you just can never ever say for definite what they are going to do because they do utter insanity on a pretty much regular basis. So we'll have to wait and see. The one thing I will say with Palmer, sometimes you can get a player because he's, choose my words carefully here, because he's not shining as brightly as he has done previously. Now, Cole Palmer's still a very good player. I think he's got 5 goals I think it's 5 in 13 in all competitions this season. I think he's got 4 goals in the Premier League in 12 appearances. He's had some injuries. So it's not an amazing year for him. It's an okay year. Last season, I think his numbers were much better. I think in the Premier League alone, it was something ridiculous like 15 goals and 9 assists in 37 games. However, he did have a little bit of a dry spell, didn't he? He had a little bit of I think it was like 16 games, last 16 games of the season, he only got 1 goal. He was absolutely flying early on in the season, and then it tailed off a bit. Now, my point there is, does that affect Chelsea's thinking where they go, okay, I'm not saying he's a poor player or anything like that. Sometimes teams and clubs can look at a player and go, maybe we could get, you know, a huge amount of money for him and invest it elsewhere. I'm just saying maybe that can happen. I think there was an element of that years ago, and I'm going back years now. So when I was a kid, when we got Andy Cole from Newcastle, where Andy Cole's numbers had dropped off a bit, and I think Kevin Keegan, who'd had a bit of a barney with him, was maybe thinking, maybe now is the time to cash in and get some money in Keith Gillespie for him. And he did, and obviously it was one of the best things that could have happened to Manchester United because Andy Cole was absolutely mint and won the lot. So I'm not saying Cole Palmer's a bad player. I'm not even saying he had a poor season last season. I'm just saying last 16 games in the Premier League, 1 goal. But before you say it, I know in the Europa Conference League and in the World Club Cup and all that, he turned up. He was very, very good, wasn't he? So to sort of almost dismiss my own argument, it's highly unlikely we get Cole Palmer. I think I'll go with highly unlikely rather than unlikely. But we'll keep an eye on it. You never know with Chelsea. That's the one thing I will say. Red Baron says, I'm convinced Carrick had them training rondos and passing drills for 2 weeks straight. Our passing looks so smooth and Martinez is our core to that. Yep, I think Carrick has changed the training, hasn't he? So it's more intense but shorter. Because I think under Amorim it was a little bit longer sessions. Carrick's made it short sessions, a lot more focus on rondos and things like that. A little bit more intensity, but it's not as long. Carlos Baleba is another one. Just touch on him quickly. We have been linked with him for a long time. His improvements have performances. His performances have improved over the last sort of few weeks. I think he had a couple of decent ones in the AFCON. Looks like he's back on United's radar, having fell off it a little bit. We'll have to wait and see there. I think the main thing with Carlos Baleba that might work in his favour is Elliot Anderson, who we've been linked with, and I think most United fans would have, has also been linked with a move to Manchester City. And also, the fee for him could be 90, 100 million. Baleba you might be able to get for 75 million. Does that come into it with United's thinking? Is it an easier transfer to make happen? The idea that you won't have to go against City perhaps for him, but he isn't arguably as good as Elliot Anderson. Let me know what you think. Get involved in the chat in the comments. Red Baron says, I can't come down from this high, Jay. Don't. Embrace it, revel in it, love it. This is why we're football fans, man. And just be unbearable towards Arsenal fans. Keep it going. Keep it going until we play Fulham, and probably keep it going after that. So, yeah, we've had a lot of hard times, haven't we, over the recent sort of last 2 years, whatever it is, 18 months as Manchester United fans. We're entitled to revel in our wins, especially big wins over, league leaders and teams we hate and clubs we hate like Arsenal. Let's talk about Bruno Fernandes. Where's this from? Is this in The Guardian? Yeah. I can tell by the font. Bruno Fernandes, I think we've mentioned this a few times. He's going to decide until the end of the season if he wants to call a skank and let Manchester United ruin the remainder of his career. Jesus Christ, they wrote this. Yeah, call a skank and let United ruin the remainder of his career. Last summer, what is this? He pretended to flirt with a move to Saudi, though, given his reputation as a footballer who loves football. No one actually believed him, but apparently he's serious this time. Of course he is, and we'll wait for United to appoint their new managerial failure, decide on a monstrous new 400 grand a week contract. Isn't enough to make him deal with Jason Wilcox and Manuel Ugarte on a regular basis, then sign it anyway. Who wrote that? Can we find out? It's quite... Daniel Harris, our mate. Daniel Harris, he's been on the channel. Wow. Scathing there, and he's and the way he's written that one. Well, we'll see what happens with Bruno. I love Bruno Fernandes. I want him to stay, and I hope he does. In other news, Manuel Ugarte. This is in the evening news. It says Suleiman Rodop has written that he could be on his way to Galatasaray. It looks like he might be going in January, according to this. Want a loan the midfielder. So then the season isn't getting many minutes. I know it's only early doors. He might still feature. And look, Michael Carrick could look at it and go, if I get an injury to Casemiro, then Ugarte's in. And that could happen. So he might not want to let him go. We haven't got loads of options in midfield, have we? Let's be honest. Sekakoni, I don't know where, he's not an option at the minute. Obviously, you can play Mount deeper if you wanted to. Bruno has played deeper, although I doubt he's going to put him back in that role after, the sort of performances we've seen him in the 10 and the sort of all that the noise around the fact that he was played out of position, it wasn't working. It seemed like a strange move, Carrick put him back in there. So I don't know with your guy. I think you're probably going to end up keeping hold of him. I think if you are going to lose a player in the window, the January window, and say that, you've just lost Dorgu. I was going to say Joshua Zirkzee, probably more likely, but now you've lost Dorgu. Does that affect your thinking there? Do you look at it and go, well, actually, I need all the bodies I could get? I wouldn't be surprised if United kept hold of everyone, like every first team sort of squad member. I know youngsters always go out on loan. I just spoke about Harry Amas going to Norwich. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we kept hold of the likes of Zirkzee and your guy. We'll wait and see what happens, and as always, we'll keep you posted. One last one, the stadium naming rights. This is from City AM, Matt Hardy, talking about how United could get a £200 million boost from naming rights to the new stadium. I expect that to happen. I don't think you can have a new stadium without naming rights. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think most fans would call it, if it was the new Trafford, they'd call it New Trafford, or if it just kept the name Old Trafford, they'd probably call it Old Trafford, regardless of what the naming rights were. We'll have to wait and see. I'm not that bothered, and I'm not that surprised. I think we all saw this coming, didn't we? We knew there was going to be naming rights. So, we'll have to wait and see. Daniel Lykin says, end of the title race. How could you say that, Jay? You are the biggest fool in Manchester. Steve M says, call it the Trident. Yes, why not? Census says, as long as it's not called Manchester United Stadium. Do you think they'll do a poll where we'll let us vote on it? I don't know about that. It'll probably end up with calling Stadium Face or whatever it was when they did that with the boat thing. I'm going to leave it there. We're going to be back later on. We've got loads going on. we've got an interview with Dave McDonnell from The Mirror, formerly of The Mirror. I think he's just left. We're going to be sitting down with him, having a chat with him. We've also got Finn, Academy Review. I think we're going to hear from Stephen Howson later on. We've also spoken to 1958 as well about the planned process ahead of the Fulham game. So there's loads of content up there. Plus, there's loads of content that's already been posted. You can still revel in the reaction to the Arsenal game. Plus, you can go and check out Premier League P8. Go and check that out. Very, very funny indeed. Make sure as well you are looking at our merchandise. There's a link in the chat to the merch. I've been Jay Motti. This has been The Paper Talk. Thanks for watching.